Welcome to the Chai Mitzvah tutorial on the midah or trait of Achrayut, responsibility. In Hebrew, the word for responsibility is Achrayut. Its Hebrew root, Aleph Chet Resh, can have two different nuances. Acher, meaning other. A leader must have regard for others, for those with whom they interact. Achar, after. A leader must have foresight to anticipate the after effects or consequences of his or her actions. Ideally, a leader would embrace both meanings of the word, care for others and clear understanding of his or her actions. We will now examine some key texts from our curriculum on Achrayut, responsibility. Our first text is text 1. That will be combined with a look at text 2. Text 1 says, "Who is wise? One who sees the consequences of their actions." Text 2, when we think of responsibility as deriving from awareness of after, achar, contemplating and including in your calculations the possible consequences of your actions, requires that you overcome the urge to satisfy your ego and your desires right now. This text from the Musar teacher, Alan Moranis, in his text, Everyday Holiness, the Jewish Spiritual Path of Musar. We look at the conversation questions. The first one asks us, how would you rephrase what Moranis says about understanding cause and effect and its relationship to ego satisfaction? This is an excellent large group question. Take time to get the volunteers going, and if people don't volunteer for discussion, as the leader, you may certainly volunteer yourself with some information that should get the conversational ball rolling. Following, we have a question that would be good for breakout rooms or small group discussion. Are you someone who tends to make rash decisions, or do you deliberate thoroughly, considering all possible consequences before making a decision? And would you agree that this kind of deliberation and wisdom is important for a leader? Should impulsiveness ever have a place in decision making? And how about intuition? These are excellent questions for breakout groups, and then to come back to the larger group and share what has been discussed. Our next texts are text 4 and 5. Text 4 says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" This from the Genesis Torah portion on the Cain and Abel story. And text 5 says, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when?" From Pirkei Avot, the teachings of our ancestors. Chapter 1, text 14. Excellent questions for discussion on these two quotes are, how would you like your leaders to respond to the questions offered in Genesis and the Pirkei Avot texts above? This is excellent as a large group discussion, sharing people's opinions, people's experiences, and whatever they would feel valuable to contribute to the discussion. In breakout rooms, you could address, how do you as a leader respond to those questions? And what responsibilities do you personally take on vis-a-vis the other? What would be good to point out before going into breakout rooms is that our leadership roles may not be ones that we typically envision as a leader. We may not be running a large corporation, but we may rather be the leader of a book group, the leader of a committee at our synagogue or in a community organization. We may be the leader in our family. And so our roles as responsible leaders vary and could be very rich for discussion, taking into account the different roles that people play as leaders in their worlds. After doing breakout discussions, it would be excellent to come back and share what people have talked about and see the different perspectives of leadership that they bring to the conversation. Our next text is text 8. This is a very popular text that is used often and people may actually remember the history of this. It is a story, a true story of what happened in 1995 when Aaron Feuerstein, CEO of Malden Mills in Massachusetts, experienced a problem in his business and how he chose to handle it. I would suggest having someone read the text aloud for all to hear, and perhaps even having them hear the text twice. Comment that you could open with is: many consider Feuerstein a hero at the forefront of a movement of business leaders for whom the bottom line was not the highest value. At the time, Feuerstein, an observant Jew, quoted from Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, verse 6, and said, "In a place where there are no men, strive to be a man." In a question for breakout rooms, in any leadership role you hold, what is one thing you could do to take more responsibility for others with whom you interact? I will also say that this is an excellent question for large group discussion, and depending how your timing is going, you could make the choice whether to do small groups in breakout, in pairs, or leave it as a large group processing discussion. Our next text for discussion is text number 13. A famous situational text from the book of Exodus. The text says, "Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock, but shepherds came and drove them off. Moses rose to their defense, and he watered their flocks. When they returned to their father Reuel, he said, 'How is it that you have come back so soon today?' They answered, 'An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock.'" Just as a point of interest, Yitro, the father of the 7 daughters, is also called by the name Reuel. So it is the same person, the father of the 7 daughters, that we are referring to in the text. Questions for conversation on this text ask, what do you tend to do when you witness an injustice? And this could open a very wonderful large group discussion on whether people consider themselves, and when they would consider themselves, to be a bystander or an upstander. Because as it will come out most likely in any group discussion, we can't always be an upstander and be in a safe situation for ourselves. And that might also be a suggestion for what to explore in a large group discussion. A question further to address: what do you think your responsibility is, if any, when you see an injustice? How do you decide whether or not to get involved? This also is a wonderful large group discussion, going off the first question that we just raised, or you could alternatively ask for people to address this in small groups or in pairs. Coming back then to the large group, it would be advisable to process the answers that people have come up with. Our next text is text 19. Text 19 is from the book of Judges and refers to the story of Deborah and Barak. It says, "Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidot, judged Israel at that time. She sat under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh, Naphtali, and said to him, 'The Eternal, the God of Israel, commanded, saying, Go march up to Mount Tabor and take with you 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and the children of Zebulun. And I will draw Sisera, the captain of Yabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, toward you up to Wadi Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hand.' And Barak said to her, 'If you will go with me, then I will go. If you will not go with me, I will not go.' And she said, 'I will surely go with you.' And Deborah went up with him." This is a classic story of the topic of women as leaders in Judaism. Deborah was a very controversial and powerful Jewish leader. She ruled during the period of the judges. She was a political leader, counselor, teacher, and community leader. She was not a leader who went on the battlefield, and she did not go on the battlefield with Barak to wage war against the enemy troops. She was a strategic leader in that she helped him, encouraged him, and also mentored him in his process and role as a leader. When we look at this text and the questions that follow, we are asked, who is the leader in this story? Who commands in this story? And who exhibits humility in this story? I think the third question about humility would be a very interesting one to address in breakout groups, while the first two questions about who is the leader and who commands in this story could very quickly be discussed as a large group and then move into the more deep discussion on who exhibits humility in this story, and perhaps launch into a discussion on what is humility and why is it an important trait for leaders to possess, and how have the members of your group found different leaders they've interacted with to possess or not possess the trait of humility, and how has that affected them personally as a member of a group or committee or others in the group as a whole. We also look at the final conversation question, which asks, have you ever received that kind of support from a superior? And how does it compare to other kinds of leadership that you have shared? So Deborah, as I said, served as a great mentor to Barak. And a wonderful question for large group or small group discussion, depending on your time factor, is what kind of support have people received from a superior, or what kind of mentorship have they received from a superior? And how has it compared to other styles of leadership they have encountered? Has it been positive? Has it worked for them? Has it not been helpful at all? Finally, as a closing, we turn to text 26. Text 26 is a prayer. And what I would suggest, there are a number of different prayers for communal well-being and praying for our leaders that this particular curriculum booklet provides. Text 26 is one, it's an excellent one, and is one that is a lovely way to end the session on Achrayut, responsibility. I would suggest it's a 3-paragraph piece, having different people maybe read each paragraph, and then having people look at it and end on that note without a discussion of this prayer, but just leaving people with more food for thought. Our booklet on responsibility, Achrayut, has various practices at its conclusion. We take a look at those practices, and there are many, many that are excellent ones to have people write about. One that I would suggest is to journal about the relationship between humility and leadership, between courage and leadership, and about responsibility and leadership, which is the toward the end of the list of suggested ones. Another one is having people perhaps reflect upon or write about or share with their study partner if they've ever mentored an up-and-coming leader and what that experience was like. There are others in the list of practices that people could try, and I recommend people experience the list and see which ones would work best for them. That is open to choice. Best of luck with your study on the midah, the trait of responsibility, Achrayut.